and welcome to the Y'all Ain't Right podcast. I'm Brittany. I'm here with Tyler and Todd. Nick will be joining us later, but today we have a very special guest, Carly Bowlen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
She is also a Wallace real estate agent, but she's also a land developer who specializes in tiny homes. So we're so excited to have her today. But before we get into anything, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. All of us are real estate agents, so we can help you with anything in East Tennessee. If we're not licensed in your state, we can also help you find a real estate agent wherever you live in the country. All of our information, phone numbers are in the details, and you can also email us at holler@yarpod.com. So anyway, welcome, Carly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Not a problem. We were excited to get you.
Yeah, so I know you're originally from Youngstown, Ohio.
Correct.
What brought you specifically to East Tennessee?
I joke and say it's not Youngstown, Ohio.
I've been to Youngstown, and I don't blame you.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, there's not a lot of opportunity in Youngstown, and I wanted different climate. That was a big factor, and more opportunity. And I just wasn't going to get that out of Youngstown. One's a little subjective as far as, if you think you can get that out of Youngstown, but the weather, that is not subjective. That is just a fact.
Rough.
Yeah, so I originally moved to Middle Tennessee, and I was in Nashville and realized that I was not a big city life girl, and I didn't actually realize how much of a big city Nashville is. So I said, that's not for me. Mountains are more my speed, and then I came out this way. So I've been in Tennessee for coming up on 8 years, and I've been in East Tennessee since 2019.
Nice.
Okay.
So 6 years, and I love it.
Yeah. Knoxville's good and spread out, unlike Nashville, where you're like fighting that traffic around Broadway
nuts.
and everything.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, when people complain about traffic here, I'm like, go to Nashville.
Yeah,
Well, heck, just go to Chattanooga.
Oh, yeah.
And fight that traffic every day. Nothing like Atlanta or Nashville and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I laugh when people complain about the traffic here.
My cousin moved to Nashville recently from Colorado. So he's originally from here. Then he moved to Texas. Then he moved to Colorado. And now he came back to Tennessee. But instead of coming back to East Tennessee, he went to Nashville. And so at the time, I was actually working in Nashville doing real estate out there. So I was doing a lot of back and forth driving, which I don't do anymore for obvious reasons. That gets old fast. But yeah, I hadn't really spent a ton of time in Nashville, so you don't think about how big it is. And he's really like just outside of Nashville, which isn't so bad at all. But when you're actually in Nashville, it's definitely different than like Knoxville. And I don't like downtown Knoxville. I'm like, this is too much for me. And Nashville, way, way bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's huge.
Well, can you talk us a little bit through the process of what you do for the tiny homes?
Yes, so my business model is very unique, and as far as I'm aware, I don't believe my business model exists outside of what I do, and it's kind of just been something that's grown and developed over time to be what it is today. So people think I'm a builder, and I'm not, and that's why I describe myself as a land developer, is because a traditional builder takes, on clients or people, and they build a house for cost plus, and you're paying them in draws. But you have certain risks associated with builders, and a lot of people, even when they hear about a builder, they're like, I'm concerned, how do I know this person's not going to take off on me? And, how do I know if they're being honest with me? Well, with what I do, it keeps my interest the same as my buyers, because my only interest is seeing the house done and sold, because I'm fronting all of the collateral for the entire build. So as a whole, my business model took out risk and took out hassle, and that's typically why people come to me. And majority of my buyers are not local. I pretty much exclusively sell to investors, and they use the properties as rentals, and a lot of these investors don't live local. It's really common for Airbnb owners in Sevierville County to not actually be local. So that part where the risk and the hassle is out while having boots on the ground is huge for the buyers that I deal with. So since I front the collateral, the buyer doesn't have the hassle of getting a construction loan, and they don't have the risk of paying interest interest payments every single month if the build's not done on time, and they don't have the risk with the builder where, what if they take off? Well, with me, if I'm funding the construction loan, if I'm carrying that construction loan and I'm paying the interest payments, it doesn't help me to not have the project done on time.
Right.
It only hurts me. And it doesn't help me, to just take off on somebody. Like if I just take off, the house doesn't get done, I lose my buyer, I don't get paid.
Right.
So I only get paid when the house is sold, and that's what makes my position the same as the buyer. Whereas if they hired a traditional builder, the builder's interest in it is not the same as the buyer's interest. I mean, there's some shared interest, but it's not totally the same.
So do you start your build before you have a buyer or after you have a buyer?
So right now, I'm actually on a waiting list that's booked into 2028. So I guess my business model is working well for me.
That's a good problem to have.
So all of my buyers are lined up before I even have the land. And what I do at this time is about 2 to 3 months before I know I'm going to be ready to build for somebody, I start what I call a land search for them. So I start looking for land that's ideal for a rental. So pretty much all of these buyers want to be right in Sevier County, and they're even pretty particular about being within kind of like a 15-minute radius. So like 15 minutes of Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, maybe Townsend or Wares Valley, and then, some parts of Sevierville. So I look for land, I go out and I physically do this search. Once I find stuff online, I'll drive it. I want to make sure there's not a junkyard next door or,
Right.
Anything that just wouldn't make a sense. Like if somebody's got a farm next door and they've got chickens, you might not want those chickens making noise next to a rental. So just key factors that are ideal. And then I also try to look for privacy and seclusion, because that's what's different about what I do is I build one tiny house on one piece of land, and I sell that one tiny house on one piece of land. So I'm not looking to stack these on top of one another. I'm looking for that privacy and seclusion so the buyer has the marketability that's best for them as a rental. So I look for that land, I find something that's ideal, and then I gather all of the pieces of land that work after looking through deed restrictions and anything else that could get in the way. Like if I think, I could run into an issue with septic approval, or I don't think we can keep the driveway at the percentage that we need to of slope to meet zoning regulations. So I go through all these things, scan through all of this, do all my due diligence, and I say, okay, here's the pieces of land that I found. I send them to the buyer and I say, does any of this interest you? And then if they do say that they're good with a piece of land, I would move forward with putting in an offer on the land, secure the land, and then I allow the buyer to pick their home model that they want. So right now I offer 4 home models, and I will be coming out with a 5th soon, but it'll probably stay at those 5 for a while. And the buyer would pick that home model, and then the other factor that we have to decide is what foundation type they're going on. So I offer what I call, just a standard foundation, which is a block foundation. And then I offer my tree house model, which I use air quotes with because I call it a tree house, but it's just a house built entirely on piers. So I build the house among the trees, not attached to the trees. And unfortunately, Sevier County will not allow you to build a traditional tree house where you attach to the trees.
Oh,
so
really?
that is a zoning regulation. At least as of today, I can't speak with past times, but I cannot build a traditional tree house. So I call this my tree house.
Is that the azalea one?
So any of my home models can be on either foundation.
Oh,
That's what I was
gotcha.
going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
any piece of property, any of the 4 and going to be 5 can fit on that property. There's not a specific one that can only go on certain properties.
Right.
and
Any
stuff
of the
like
home
that.
models can go on either foundation. And the buyer can choose which one they want, but typically the land dictates which one you're going to go with because the topography plays a role in everything. So my general rule of thumb is if the land's roughly 50% slope or greater, it's just going to make more sense to do the piers because at that point, if you're putting in a block foundation, it's actually going to cost you more that route than it would with piers. Now, if it's 50% or less, then we can probably get away with a block foundation without elevating the costs. But if the buyer just wants the aesthetic of the piers and the treehouse marketing, then we could have a flat piece of land and build it on piers if they want that aesthetic. But typically the land dictates, and most of my buyers will say, whatever makes the most sense, just do that. So once we figured out that foundation type, then they can go under contract for the purchase of the house. And then we start moving forward with actual construction and breaking ground once I'm ready to build for them. But the buyer can customize any finishes on the house. So I kind of have a little bit of a mixture of multiple different concepts into my business model, because that's almost like a little more spec home building.
Right.
But I want them to have that personalization. So it's not just, cookie cutter, this is the model you get, this is exactly what it's going to look like, because that doesn't give anybody any personalization. And with a lot of these rentals, even though you see a lot of the common themes of like bears and, trees and the mountains, there's still a lot of buyers that want their own touch on it. So they can pick the flooring color, the countertop color, the cabinet color, the light fixtures. They can make that model look different than the last time I built it. So they get that personalization through the process. And then I just facilitate the build. I look to find out if there's anything they'd like to add on that's easier during construction versus post-construction. So a lot of these buyers want a fire pit. Another feature that's been really common is like barrel saunas. So, they might ask me to add an extra deck if we're on a severely sloped piece of land and they could implement a barrel sauna. Or they might say, hey, can we excavate a flat space? And I'd like to put a fire pit. And I help facilitate all these details so their build can be everything they need it to be. So if there's something I can facilitate during the build, or if it's more cost effective to facilitate during the build, then I'll let them know, like, hey, if you go to add this after, you're going to be digging up this ground again. You're going to have to run a line for the barrel sauna for your electric.
What is a barrel sauna? I think I know, but
it's just a sauna. They're smaller saunas. I don't know if they make a larger one, but like 2, 3, 4 person saunas.
It kind of looks.
So a sauna that's literally shaped like a barrel.
A big barrel.
It's just a big circle.
I think I've seen them. I was in my head. I was like, I think that's what it is. But
Todd's over here like,
sure.
Can I fit?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I was thinking everyone's doing the cold plunges. I'm like, I'm like, nah, that's not a sauna. But gotcha. So, how do you price them? So, is it going to be, you have a basic cost for X layout plus the land, and then plus what they pick?
So, all of my pricing has the land included in it, with the exception of if somebody wants,
10 acres.
If they want more land, or they have to have a mountain view. Like, I don't have a mountain view factored in my price. And I always tell my buyers, the one thing I can't control is what land is for sale when I go to look, what actually exists, and what the seller's asking for it. Those are the factors I can't control.
Is that the hardest part, you think, finding the land?
Yes. And I will say it's because of deed restrictions. So a lot of people don't know this, so this might blow some people's mind, but it's so simple.
Yeah.
Any piece of land that's been subdivided therefore creates a subdivision on paper. So people hear the word subdivision and they're like, oh yeah, all these houses that are in a row and it ends in a cul-de-sac. Like, that's a subdivision. And that's not true. If you subdivide a piece of land off of another piece of land, you've created a subdivision. And I can't speak outside of really Sevier County or other states. I'd assume it works that way, but disclaimer that I'm only speaking on Sevier County, Tennessee. But that creates a subdivision on paper. And the person who owns the land that subdivides it, at that time that the subdivision's created, they're allowed to put restrictions on the land. And that's where your deed restrictions come from. And it could be anything from no farm animals to no junkyards, or, no nuisances after 10 p.m. I mean, they can really put, I'd say, almost anything they want.
Minimum square footage on a house.
And minimum square footage is my enemy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of these pieces of land I buy, some of them were subdivided in, 1940.
Right.
So we're talking over 60 years ago, closer to a century, the better part of a century. And tiny homes weren't a thing. And you didn't build a tiny home on a permanent foundation. It just wasn't even a concept. So quite often, they're almost always over 1,000 square feet, those minimums. Yeah. But quite often they're 2,000, 1,500, 1,800. And currently, my largest home model is 575 square feet, a whopping 575. And I think it's a monster every time I build it, because I've got one that's 330 square feet. And I'm like, holy crap, this azalea model's huge.
How many square feet is the azalea?
575.
575.
Yeah.
So the Azalea is your biggest model out of those.
It is. Yeah.
Maybe 5, but
I looked
Yeah.
at those models, and I will say the Azalea is the one that I would pick to personally live in.
same
Yeah.
I
thing.
love it.
I always like an A-frame, but the functionality of an A-frame always gets me. But
Well-
but it is pretty vertical, so there isn't a lot of
Geometry
lost
is
space.
rough.
Yeah.
Like I found that out the hard way. Once you do one in real life, all the geometry gets funky, and it's like, wait a minute, like how am I going to mount anything to the walls? Like the walls are angled; they go all the way to the ground.
Just
so
have a picture frame just kind of
That's-
hanging.
you have to start doing a lot of build outs. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you put cabinets up? And I'm sure maybe somebody out there makes a cabinet that comes with like a wedge shape, and you could do that with an A-frame, but you know,
There's an
getting your
extra cost
typical
for that.
supply, going with your typical supply, something that's not a 3-month wait list to get it built
And
custom.
It'd have to be custom because
Yeah.
no A-frame has the same exact angle.
You
so
have different
it's-
roof pitches.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you were talking about living in tiny homes, like, oh, I'd want to live in the 570 something square feet. So, do you live in a tiny home since you
I
build
do
these
not.
things? No.
Could you live
Yeah.
in one?
Yeah.
I don't think I could. Or if I did, I'd have to have a huge garage because I'm a car girl. So,
And speaking of which, that was my next question. Well, coming up, we maybe Facebook stalked you a little bit. We saw your Cadillac on the Dragon. Are you a member of any car clubs or anything? Or
I am not. I've been asked here and there to join a few, but I don't know if it's commitment issues or what it is. But
That's a real thing, so.
I don't, that, you know, to have to be so committed. I don't like signing up for things unless I feel like I can participate at the level that somebody expects me to. And if they want me at a certain number of meets, you know, or to make a certain appearance, I don't want to, you know, let somebody else down or not fulfill the commitment I signed up for. And it's like, well, I am a business owner. I am busy. So I kind of just like to go as I can. It's like, hey, you know, this Saturday's free and I could pop in at this car event, but nobody's saying, hey, we're expecting you to be there. And then
So what is special about that Cadillac? I saw the...
a good amount.
That's what I'm trying to get out of you.
She's got a cam headers, straight piped from the headers back, bigger injectors. Just had it retuned.
So no cats?
No cats. Those cats are gone. Yeah, they're long gone. And you would know the second it starts up. Yeah, they're not there.
And similar, have you sold? I saw you had a cruiser and you want to get back into the sport bike. Did you?
Yeah.
Did you sell that yet, or?
No, I've still got my Indian Scout Bobber right now.
So,
and
so any listeners out there that are
Yeah.
looking for an Indian?
Yeah.
it's a great bike. So, I mean, if you still want a sporty life, but you're not ready to go with a cruiser, like an Indian's a great bike. For me, I'm just really into, you know, leaning into bends and that the feel and handling of more of a sportier, like a crotch rocket type of bike. So I thought I was ready to switch over to a cruiser and got one. I'm like, I really want a Yamaha MT series, like a Yamaha MT-09 or an 07. I'd love to have
So
one
anybody
of
looking
those.
for a trade? So you have ridden the Dragon, we take it.
Yes, car and motorcycle.
And so I
Yeah.
figured, yeah. So
You can't not when you're this close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we've talked about the Dragon a few times on the podcast here. So
Yeah.
That's so funny.
do you have a favorite layout model?
Right now I'm a little partial to the Lily, which is the A-frame, just because I actually designed that on paper myself. So I thought, how can I make 330, well, I didn't know what the square footage was going to shake out to be, but how can I make something less than 400 square feet was my target. And I didn't, again, I rely on the architect for all the geometry and configuring everything, but I knew I wanted a small kitchen. I knew I wanted a bathroom that didn't make you feel like you had to tuck your arms in to your shoulders, you know, into your body just to squeeze through.
Can I shower in that one?
Yes, yes. It's even got a standard height, which is impressive on an A-frame. 330 square foot house on an A-frame, but standard height shower door.
Nice.
So I think it's about 76 inches, and it could have fit a taller door. But
That's
76, 78 is pretty standard. So yeah, you could get out in there just fine.
From start to finish, roughly, what's going to be the bottom dollar for a buyer? Like, I know it's going to be all over the place, probably.
For the price?
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of drifted away from that question. So I have a price for each model on a block foundation and on the treehouse foundation, so on piers. So there's 2 prices per model, block foundation and treehouse foundation. And it's a really good gauge and a really good ballpark that I can hover around that number, but each piece of land is different. So there can be a give or take. Or again, if a buyer says I have to have a mountain view, I let them know right then how much more are you willing to spend on top of the normal sales price to get that? Because again, I can't control what the sellers are asking for their land. And I find that out and then adjust the land search accordingly for them. So I have all my pricing on my website for each model. And actually, I need to have Howard updated a little bit, but I have it on there, and I tend to hover around those price ranges. The Lily on a block foundation is under $300,000, and the azalea on a block foundation is just under $400,000. So there is a big difference between the smallest and the largest. Yeah. And again, the treehouse foundations change. And why I'm partial to the Lily, other than me designing it, is because it was really important to me to have a lower price range for first-time investors. Because, me personally, I come from nothing. I'm like, I couldn't imagine, just trying to buy an investment property as my first Airbnb. And the market in Sevier County is so competitive. And it just seems like if you don't have $1 million in your pocket, how are you going to get into investing and owning an Airbnb? So, it's a good market to be in, but not everybody has $1 million.
Right.
So I wanted to come out with a smaller model, because obviously if the square footage was less, the build cost was going to be less for the most part. So I wanted something that was smaller, that didn't have to have all this luxury stuff in it, but it had enough to be a comfortable, cozy, cute rental. So the people that are like, hey, I'm going to be out hiking. I'm not going to be even there much, but I want a clean, nice place to rest my head. Right. That has a hot tub, has the deck, just enough. So by keeping that square footage smaller, I could keep the price tag lower. And I really, really wanted to come out with something that was less than 300 square feet, so there would be an opportunity for first-time investors. So that's why I'm a little partial to the Lily right now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So how did you get started? Is that a loaded question?
It is. It was one of those, typical life redirected me, everything's got a plan type of things, not to sound cliche or cringy. But I was doing line work, and I had a lot of medical issues that were affecting me.
So when you say line work, you're talking power lines?
Climbing telephone poles.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. I saw a picture on there, yeah.
So I worked on, I did electrical and traffic lights, I did electrical and street lights, and I decided the voltage wasn't high enough. I needed more of a challenge.
I'm seeing a pattern of adrenaline seeking.
I was going to say, yeah.
I guess you caught on to that. I like to experience life. Yeah, you're only here once, so.
Good point.
So I wanted more of a challenge, and that's when I said, I want to work on power lines. So I went into an apprenticeship, and I was going through the apprenticeship before I ultimately stopped line work. So I had these medical issues that were affecting me and ultimately caused me to get written off of work on disability. And it was like, my livelihood was just taken away. It was one of those, like, what am I going to do now? And it took over a year, actually, for the doctors to give me a diagnosis and then ultimately say, you're never going back to that job. And I'm stubborn, so, I'd be one of those people that's like, I'm going back. But I could have got myself or a coworker killed.
Right.
And they joke, in line work, you don't get second chances. So I had to listen to the doctor. I couldn't go against their advice. And it was like, all right, I have to find a different path now.
It's a smart move to actually listen to the medical advice.
Right?
Usually the adrenaline seeker is like, do it anyway.
If it wasn't such a risky career, but it is.
Yeah.
It has that, deadly factor, so to speak. So it was important to listen. So that was in 2020, around August of 2020. So we're talking.
So you were already here.
Yeah, I was here. So we're talking, COVID times, like the height of COVID. And it was like, what am I going to do now? So I thought, well, if I flip houses, I'll work for myself. If I feel like I'm getting fatigued, like physically, I can take breaks as I need, and I'll still get to work on stuff because I wanted to do physical work, and I just felt like that'd be something that I could figure out and enjoy. But with COVID, if you think of the real estate industry in August of 2020, roughly, this might have even been into 2021-ish by the time, I had found all this out. And I mean, this area was just going crazy. So to get your hands on a house, like even in Knoxville, there were so many investors around here. And every time I'd get a little more money together, it was like I still just didn't have enough. So, I was going to go that route, and I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Well, at this time, I had already been Airbnb-ing the basement of my house, even when I was doing line work. I have a basement that's separate from the rest of the house. It's got, it's a walkout basement, has its own garage, its own entrance. So it truly is a separate stay. It's kind of like a basement apartment, so to speak. Yeah. So I had done Airbnb for probably about 3 years at that time. So I had that experience in the rental community. It was like, okay, well, I've done this. It was very hands-on because I lived there in the house. So every time a guest checked out, I could see what they were using, what they weren't using, how they left the space, things they liked. Very hands-on experience. So I had that short-term rental experience. And I found out that there was a guy that had built kind of a community of about, I'd say 6 tiny houses at that time towards Douglas Lake.
I showed a handful of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think he kept a few and rented them, but at that time he had sold 2. And I saw what they sold for, and with me just being a Youngstown, Ohio girl, like my brain still hadn't adjusted to Tennessee prices, and I'm like, holy crap, that's what those sold for? And I'm like, it would just seem like there would be a decent profit margin there. Like, I had no idea what it would cost to build a house. That's not the trade I was in. Yes, I've worked in the trades at that time for many years, but house building wasn't what I did. Residential wasn't what I did. And I'm like, well, maybe it's worth finding out what it would cost to build one of these. So I got in touch with a contractor and just had them, bid out what it would cost to build one of those. And looking at what 2 of them sold for versus what it would cost to build one, even just paying somebody and then factoring in kind of roughly what land would cost, the numbers just made sense. And I'm like, I feel confident enough in those 2 sales with what they sold for and how the market was at that time that I can make it work. So a lot of people ask me, well, weren't you scared to start a business, or, how'd you feel about it? I'm like, I just took out a crap ton of money in debt, and I bet it all on myself. I was like, I just bet it all on myself. Like,
it's motivation.
What did I have to lose at that point? So I was like, why not? The numbers make sense. Let's try it. So, and I went that route, and it's been developing ever since.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to break, and I think we'll bring Nick in.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Hey y'all, Tyler here with another real estate tip of the day. The process of buying land can be very different than buying an established home. Before you get carried away with visions of building your dream home, there are things you should consider. You should ask your realtor to check things like the property's zoning type, neighborhood restrictions, access to local utilities, and possible street access. You're also going to want to evaluate any potential land clearing or grading costs and check to see if a previous survey is on file in the county records office. These are only a few of the many parts of this process, and it's important that you work with an experienced agent to help guide you through it. If you want to know more about buying land, or if you have other real estate questions, be sure and give us a shout over at holler@yarpod.com.
And welcome back. So now we are
Howdy.
here with Nick and Tyler and Carly. So, I checked out your time-lapse video on your YouTube. So she also has a YouTube page.
That's the
what was
one you
it?
sent this morning, right? The treehouse.
Yeah, it's
was
built
cool.
by Carly, right?
Yes.
If someone wants to find it.
We'll throw an ad or a link up there too, and then put it in the description. That way people can filter back to see
Perfect.
those kinds of things.
Yeah, so go follow her YouTube so you can keep up with all those cool stuff. But yeah, there was a time lapse of the build of the azalea, and that was really awesome.
I was really excited about that. And it's probably worth noting I didn't have an online presence for my business until roughly the beginning of 2024. So originally I did this without any online presence. So now I'm trying to work on the building up the social media and letting people see more of the process and just having more information out there. And the time lapse I was really excited to do, to set 2 cameras out there and just try to show people the process and help people understand that these are site-built homes. This is built the same way any other home would be. It's the same thing as any other normal home build that you would expect. It's just smaller. And even after people look through my website, sometimes people still don't understand this is a site-built home. This is on a permanent foundation. And I thought, why don't we just show them?
Yeah.
So these cameras take pictures every 5 minutes, and then, a really good video guy puts it all together. And I'll have a few more coming out of the 2 Lily builds that I've just wrapped up. So I would say within about the next 3 weeks, there will be 2 Lily models with time-lapse videos if I set up the camera as well. I try to check them. That's photography and videography is not my specialty, but there should be 2 more videos, and one of the lilies will be on a block foundation and one will be treehouse, and they each got some really cool landscaping features on these 2 locations. So I'm really excited for those time-lapse videos to come together.
Well, I'll be looking out for that.
Yeah. Those are just really entertaining to watch. The time-lapse videos of pretty much anything, but watching something get built like that is really cool.
Which is satisfying. I mean, you get to see, everybody wants to see everything so rapidly these days.
Yeah.
Like, I need instant gratification. I need to see it very quickly. And it's, 6 months worth of time in 2 to 3 minutes. So, I mean, you get to take in half a year in 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes.
So is that your kind of pretty close to standard build time on something like this, unless it gets, if you're adding all the bells and whistles, like you were saying earlier, they want a deck, they want a fire pit, if they add all that, obviously it's probably going to take longer. But is it typically around the 6-month mark from start to finish build?
It is. I usually use about 6 months as the best time frame and try to hover around there. Now, obviously the azalea is the largest and the lily is the smallest, so if they have one versus the other, they have a little more advantage on time. And it also depends on the properties of the actual land. So it's like, do we have something that's more difficult to build on than other? And pretty much everything I build on is sloped.
In the mountains. Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know building uphill is easier than building downhill. So things like that, like what type of property are we dealing with? And do we have to have a wing wall? And if it's over a certain number of feet, an engineer has to be involved. And anytime you are doing piers, an engineer has to be involved. And you just add extra technical details, and anytime the technical details are in there, it could add to time. So there's a give and take, but generally speaking, I leave about 6 months for each build, start to finish.
That makes sense.
And people get upset at me when I do, a 5,000 square foot build for a year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're lucky it's done in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, it's not a quick process. So that's actually pretty fast.
Yeah.
All things considered. I mean, I've built up there a couple of times, some log cabins.
Okay.
Stuff like that. And it's, in my experience, Sevierville's not the easiest code department to work with. I say that nicely. But, like, have you run into some serious issues with, I guess, for me, aside from, like you were talking about earlier, the deed restrictions, which I'm sure is a nightmare with the square footage, because I run into that all the time too, even on normal builds. But, like, is the code department very adverse to what you're doing? Like, are they not a fan of all these tiny homes, or do they even care? Or
no.
How do they treat your build? Like, when they come on site, are they treating it like a typical build? Are they trying to inspect it that way, or are they a little lenient given how small it is? They understand that maybe code can't be followed to a T.
So there's a different tiny house code. So you have like certain general building codes, but what Sevier County adopted as their code is a tiny house is 400 square feet or less.
So they have a specific IRC tiny house code.
Yes.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
So, and again, every county can adopt whatever code they want. Like right now, Sevier County's on 2018. Gatlinburg, I think, is on a different one. I think they're newer than that. And again, things change from county to county, state to state. But the code that Sevier County adopted considers a tiny house, a true tiny house, 400 square feet or less. And where certain details can change at that point. So where details can change is with a tiny house, you can use a loft to get to a ladder. Now you've got a bunch of codes you got to follow and certain details you have to follow there, but you can use a tiny house you can use a ladder to access a loft. Now, if you're a regular house, you cannot use a ladder to access a loft.
So do they classify your Azalea as a regular house?
Technically, it's a regular house.
Yeah.
It's not a tiny house.
That's interesting. I was sitting there thinking about that when I was listening to you guys. It's like, I wonder what the code, the code specifics are. So they actually have adopted, what is that, like an IRC tiny house code compliant thing, or is it?
I don't know
specific to
the
them?
terminology, but you find a different section that, lofts are treated even differently
Gotcha.
than they would in a bigger build. So, but Sevier County really isn't adverse to the square footage. For the most part, they just navigate it the same way they would anything else.
I think they're just happy to have all that tourist revenue coming in, so they're really open to anything that brings more of that.
Right. Now, I will say on the zoning side, they've gotten a lot stricter, especially if you're critical slope. So they don't want structures stacked on top of structures, again, especially if you're critical slope. So they're trying to keep, my interpretation of it with the way it's written right now is they're trying to keep land a little more whole. So like even right now, you couldn't subdivide a piece of land to 0.2 acres. It doesn't even meet their classification for a piece of land.
That's what I was wondering, because I know early on the tiny house builds got really popular, very trendy, and everyone was throwing up these what I called tiny house farms.
Yeah.
Where you, like you said, you just see them kind of like bang, 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 bang. And I kind of figured that Sevierville's probably not big on that because of all the slope and hillside protection stuff. And it's just, I thought it was cool, but I like your concept of having, to me, the Lily is my favorite.
Really?
Yeah, I like the A-frame style. I think, if you put it on the right lot with enough trees and the right backdrop, it's perfect setting for that.
Like the cover of a magazine.
Yeah. The other one, is it the juniper that's more like cabiny?
Yes, juniper and laurel loft.
Yeah, or laurel loft. Yeah, that's the one. That one I'm interested because it's almost got like a whole second floor, doesn't it?
Right.
That one. How often do you build that one?
Less frequently. So this is a kind of, I don't know if you want to say against the grain, but not what you would expect, is pretty much all of these buyers that are coming to me, they want more contemporary.
Yeah.
They feel like the cabin look and, the same thing that all the other cabins have. I don't know if they feel it's played out, but everybody's trying to set themselves apart now.
Yeah.
And everybody's done the cabin look in Sevier County.
I kind of thought you'd say that because, a lot of the cabins we built, they were starting to trend away from your traditional full log chinking, the traditional Smoky Mountain cabin to more of a, let's use cabin like log siding veneer and really modernize the interior.
Yeah.
A lot of glass, that kind of, that's why I think the A-frame to me is probably the best look, personally.
I've been seeing a ton of, we see it all the time doing what we do. We're always looking at what's new, what's listed, what's going on. And so we lately, I have been at least noticing that a lot of these new build cabins are more like very modernized, big, black hardwood colors, lots of glass, like you said.
You got that one builder up there that's doing slant roofs, all the same pitch, it almost looks like something out of Chicago or some like inner city.
And they'll
that you wouldn't
stagger
expect.
it up too, so you have like the same pitch in two different directions. It's really kind of cool looking, but it's creating this trend style. My worry is like, how long will that trend last, and then maybe we shift somewhere else. But that's always how it is. But
see, I think to each their own. But I like the tiny home because it's different, and a lot of the ones with the A-frame and everything, it's got the natural light, and you kind of have that privacy in the trees. Like people are going to gravitate towards that. Yeah. But if you're not doing that, then from someone who's worked in booking rentals, we would have all these houses on our program if it wasn't like a true log cabin or something super unique, like a tiny home like that, then it just wouldn't book as well. So, I think these modern kind of cabin looks are cool and all, everybody's wanting to set themselves apart, but really the people that come to this area don't necessarily want something that's set apart. They want the cabin, the true log cabin, or they want something super unique or themed.
Yeah.
Basically. I think if you're going to live here, if you choose to live up there, I think a lot of people want the traditional log home.
Yeah.
But,
right.
I work almost exclusively with investors as well, and some of them, they all want the modern look. Because it's just more eye-catching, versus the old cabin in the woods kind of thing. Not everyone wants that. especially the younger crowd, the new rental crowd. Like my parents would love that, but I mean, they're also 70 years old, so they don't really take vacations anymore.
I'm sure there's probably a good mix of who wants to go to those, because it's like you want the cabin in the woods, you're going to the area because you want to get away. You know, you're going to the mountains, you want that retreat, something kind of relaxing. But at the same time, yours are such a good mix of the cabin feel and the modern, unique vibe.
I think that's why our model works.
Yeah, it works really well.
Because if you take like an acre or 2 acre plat of land out there, and you put one little tiny home in the back right corner, nestled away in the trees. I mean, isn't that what you want?
Yeah.
When you go take a mountain vacation? Like now, I don't do it because it's just the bears.
Oh, yeah.
The tiny home, I feel like a bear would just crush. I'd be scared. But, aside from that, like, what's one of the weirdest modifications that someone has asked you to do on one of your builds? Like, has it been more, because I would have to assume a lot of it's been more exterior. Like maybe with porches or decks or pools or stuff like that. But like, what's one of the weirdest ones that just kind of sticks out that someone maybe recently has asked for modification?
I actually had, at first I was thinking I didn't have any, but I had a buyer ask me recently for metal roofing that looked like wood. So I got with my Rep at 84 lumber, and it exists. It's more of like a stamp.
Yeah, I've seen
on
that.
the metal. It exists, but it's so pricey that the buyer was like, well, it's not that worth it to me. But I looked into it for him. Like I said, I want my buyers to have what they want. So if there's something I can facilitate or accommodate them on, then, I'll try my best.
That goes back to the old story I tell people. I had a client ask for rusty new tin.
New tin.
Yeah.
They wanted a new tin that was rusted, but done in a shop where it was controlled and wasn't flaky, and I was like, okay, I'll see if I can find it.
Wow.
And you can find it. That's the thing. Like, a lot of times it's very expensive, but you can typically find some of this crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's
that
interesting.
Same stamping process on the metal, I think they have a look like that. But like my rep at 84 said, he said, if you're up close, you can see this and it looks like wood grain. He said, but by the time you're even on the ground looking up at the roof, he's like, the guy's not going to get his money worth. So, he was really honest with me, and I was really honest with the buyer. I was like, you can do it if you want, but, the second you're even at ground level of the house, you're going to miss those details.
It's going to make a real pretty picture from a drone for one shot.
Yeah.
After that.
So he liked the azalea, but he wanted to flip-flop the contrast on the finishes of the exterior. So the roof is black, and the house is mostly just wood tones.
So he wanted wood tone and black soffit and roof and gutters.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be a pretty unique look, though.
It would be.
So I don't know that it. I guess you could say that's the weirdest thing. Like, I don't know if it was weird. It's just unique and different.
No, that is. That's a good one.
But I was like, And, of course, I started asking ChatGPT about it.
Yeah.
Like, Chat can search the whole internet for me in about 5 seconds. So, and saw a few options there and contacted 84. So that's probably the most unique request I've had, and unfortunately, he's not moving forward with it. Sometimes I get excited when buyers ask me for things I haven't done before, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to look really cool.
Have you thought about venturing out? Like, are you kind of settled into just doing the mountain Sevierville area? Or have you thought about taking this to any of the lake areas around East Tennessee or anything?
Really just the demand has been for where I focus on now.
Yeah.
I get a lot of calls for North Carolina and Georgia, people asking me if I will build there, and my answer is the same every time. I only build where I live, because that allows me to oversee every single one of my builds, to be there physically. I'm the one that's going out and looking at this land, and then even though I have a whole team that works for me, which includes a licensed GC, I am not a licensed GC. I have a lot of the knowledge, so I'm actually the one that goes out ahead of time, and I'm like, okay, I look at this piece of land, I'm like, all right, let me see if there's any pre-existing septic permit that ever exists. Let me see if there's any soil mapping on file. And in my head, I'm going, okay, I think we can put the house here. I think we can bring the driveway in here. I think the septic's, based off of that old permit's going to go over here. You have to plan everything around one another. So I'm configuring all of that and lining all of that up. And then I'll get my excavation guy out before I ever close on land. I get my surveyor out before I ever close on land. And I'm verifying everything and planning all of the details and strategizing everything. So I'm really heavy on the front end, but that takes me being physically present.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not comfortable building anywhere my resources aren't, and that I'm not.
That's the way we do it. We do like a 1 hour radius. I mean, that is it. Like because like you said, I mean, if you want to be present, Like, it's hard to do that at Lake Lure, North Carolina, and then
Right.
hop over to Dalton, Georgia, and then also do all your builds in Sevierville.
Right.
I mean, you could, but that'd be, you'd be putting in some miles.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned before, I'm booked into 2028 right now.
Oh, the demand is awful. I mean, you got you're not busy at all.
Honestly, that's one of the most impressive things I've heard.
That is
thank
awesome.
you.
The fact that you're booked, I mean, that is dynamite.
Thank
yeah.
you.
That's
Well, and I
awesome.
didn't mean to bring it up to sound like I'm bragging,
No.
but I was
No,
going to
that's-
comment on partially why.
Yeah.
So what couples with that I won't build outside of, where I build now is my happy balance point to give my buyers the quality I want and the experience that I want them to have is to do 3 builds simultaneously at all times, but I'm not comfortable taking on more than 3.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Because that's about 6 builds a year.
That was the next question I was going to ask is how many are you usually doing consecutively? So
Right.
if you've usually got about 3 running at the same time.
Well, you
And that's
can-
3 under construction, and then that means overlapping with that, I could be looking at 1 or
You'd
2
be looking at
pieces
more
of
land.
land,
Yeah.
Okay.
buying that land, lining it up with septic or well or anything else that any of that preliminary stuff before we break ground.
on a killer year, you might be doing like 6 to 8. Just depending on how you stack
Right,
them. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So if one had public utilities, because I swear, driveway and utilities are my biggest holdup by the end of the build.
Oh,
Either
yeah.
the driveway's holding me up or the utilities are holding me up. So if one had public utilities and it didn't have a complicated driveway, it could be on the 4-month end.
Right.
Now, obviously, some could be on the 8-month end, unfortunately, but that puts you in that mix of about 6 months builds.
Well, that's a good balance, though. I mean,
Yeah.
People around here, I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but people will tell you, it's once you start getting into mass production, something has to give. And typically, not all the time, but typically, it's the quality.
Yes.
Takes the biggest hit. That's why I like kind of what you're doing is you're kind of guaranteeing that quality is going to be there, which for a lot of people, especially investors, as you know, they like the turnkey, the minimal maintenance. A new build is always top of the list, but they're also the most expensive. Like you said, sometimes they can be $800,000 to
Yeah.
$1 million, and offering an option at $300,000 to $500,000 is a really good way for even your just young couple that, like you said, are wanting to get started. I mean, that's a really cool concept that once upon a time I thought about it. I thought about the tiny houses on wheels
Yeah.
and all that stuff because they were so quick to build, but then I got to thinking like, yeah, that's kind of like a Clayton Homes. I mean, you're manufacturing that on site somewhere and then delivering it, and you can't guarantee that quality transfers to wherever they're going to take it. So that's really cool that you're building it on foundations.
Well, it allows me the ability to have a larger footprint and taller ceilings. And the vaulted ceilings are what make these houses not make you feel closed in.
Right.
Whereas people don't think about this. Again, another simple concept. Once you hear it, you're like, duh. But when you build on wheels, you've already got the height of the trailer that's taken away from your height of your house.
You got
There's a
overpasses.
maximum load
Yeah.
size because you've got overpasses to go under. They can only build those so tall. And your trailer's taking away part of that height.
Imagine trying to build an A-frame on a trailer
Yes.
that has to go under 13
Yes.
and a half feet.
So they're restricted. I mean, they
Yeah.
have to haul it. So if you
Yeah.
have to haul it, you have to go under overpasses, which means you are limited on height. You can only go so high at the end of the day. And then again, even with oversized loads, you can only haul so wide.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the regulations are, but you can only make it so wide. You're not going to make it 2 lanes wide on an interstate. So you're just so limited on your footprint and your elevation. And that's what makes my builds feel like they're bigger than they are, is because if I'm building on site, I can make the bigger footprint that wouldn't be able to be able to be hauled down the street, and I can make the taller elevation.
I'm going to put you on the spot with this one.
Oh, man.
Do you own any of them?
That's what I was going to ask. Well, she mentioned she had done Airbnb in the past,
know,
so
that's
I
what
was
I was
thinking, have you
curious.
kept
Yeah.
any? And
No.
Like, have you just gotten a wild hair and decided, you know what, I'm going to build me one?
I have 5 acres that I really have an intent, and I have a little bit of background work going on for it, to build a basically 3-bedroom tree house.
That's cool.
And I've got the architectural plans done. I've been working with an artist on the renders, and it's in the background, But because I've gotten so busy with building for investors, it's like, well, they're ready to go. They're in front of me. They want to make their build happen yesterday.
And
so
that makes you money.
I've made that my priority. So I'm like, at some point, I'll kind of start to implement that 5 acres I have where I could do the 3-bedroom. So I would love to get back into owning one and doing the rental side also to have a little diversified income. But for me, it's so educational because Airbnb keeps changing so many things. And I just got out of this middle of last summer is when I stopped hosting. And I still get the emails, and I'm like, oh my gosh, so much keeps changing. They keep coming out with all these like betas and different concepts, and it puts me out of touch. And it's my knowledge in that rental community that's really helped me with building for these investors, is because I have that experience. I know the policies. I know how Airbnb runs. So if I can get back into the hosting side again, it's going to keep me in touch and keep me in tune. And then that only helps the investors that I build for.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
So just for that, even I'd love to get back on that side and be in touch with the changes. So, because that makes a big difference. And I've had quite a few buyers tell me that they see a gap between a traditional builder and a host, and that there's usually not that blend, but it makes a difference because you have that forethought. You're like, okay, well, I've personally ran into XYZ, so we're going to try to avoid that. And then that's why we're going to plan this out this way or that way. So I want to get back into that side.
Well, I think that was really great information. I really enjoyed. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for
that was
out.
A great episode. I know you got to run. But yeah, did you have any other questions before we head out?
I think that has most of my stuff covered, but you did such a good job of giving us such thorough and informative stuff. And it's not just like, here, let me just talk to you. It's entertaining, and I really enjoy that kind of stuff. So
I'm glad.
This was good.
I hope I wasn't jumpy. I felt like it was a little all over the place.
We'll link all of your websites and all that stuff on there.
I have a question for the gallery. Dog with training wheels. Is that your dog, or is that just a
dog with... A dog that I had, she unfortunately, she got IVDD, invertible disc disease, and that happened while I had her. So one day I went to work and she was fine. I came home and she was paralyzed from the waist down. So this is a whole other story, but I rushed her in to the animal hospital that night. They did surgery. Unfortunately, it didn't work. And then I went through rehab with her. She actually did dog rehab and it was UT. I have to give them a shout out because they were amazing.
They are.
UT's department for animal rehabilitation is amazing. They've got an underwater treadmill. They've got a regular treadmill. To try to help dogs' mobility, whether it's an injury or whether it's old age, what they have available is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I took my dog there and tried to help her learn how to walk again reflexively because she couldn't feel anymore. But had her in a wheelchair for a while, but ultimately she ended up slipping another disc, and her quality of life was just very, very, very poor at that point. And I just had to make the unfortunate decision of what was best for her and not be selfish of me just trying to keep her around when her quality of life wasn't great anymore. But she was mine, and she lived a fulfilling life.
Way to go, Todd.
Way to go, Todd.
But yeah, no, she was a sweetheart. She really was. And she didn't care. The positive side, and on something positive, dogs are so resilient. Like, that just showed me how darn resilient they are.
Oh yeah.
Because to her, having the wheelchair to support her back legs was no different than when she had legs. Like, she would literally go try to climb rocks and go in the creek with it. Like, it was no different to her, literally no different. And that's what's so amazing about
awesome.
Animals like that, is they're so resilient. They keep going.
Once they cut it off of their shoulder.
And it's just one of those, like we should just take a lesson from them. They don't feel bad, and they're like, I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to live my life. And that's what she did. So she would play. She would do everything. Still wanted to do tug of war, run around the house. So, yeah, she was a little soldier. So, and like I said, UT is amazing. They're amazing for what they have there. So.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and everybody go check out her YouTube page and subscribe and hit her up for any investment properties.
Yeah, if you're looking to do some of the coolest, unique little tiny home things I've ever seen, that's the place to go.
Very cool.
All right, see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you or someone you know is thinking about buying or selling real estate in East Tennessee, email us at holler@yarpod.com. You can also reach Brittany Hawkins at 423-270-9572, Todd Huber at 865-456-0101, Tyler Letner at 865-816-0076, and Nick Cantey at 865-250-5167. Our office at Wallace Real Estate can be reached at 865-584-4000. Make sure to ask for YARPod. See y'all next week.